today I'm making lasagna. First step is I got to take this ground turkey and turn it into like an Italian sausage.
So to a pound of ground turkey, I added 1 egg, 1 teaspoon salt, 1 teaspoon pepper, 1 tablespoon of brown sugar, and 1 teaspoon of garlic. And then I mixed it the old-fashioned way with my hands. I did forget to take off my ring, so that'll have to be cleaned later. After that was mixed well, I took a tablespoon of olive oil and put that in a frying pan. Now the ground turkey will be really sticky at this point. That's why it comes out with a sausage textured consistency. So I continuously try to break it up as it's cooking. Once completely browned, I put it in a separate bowl.
The second step is to brown up some ground beef.
So this is a pound of ground beef I added straight to the pan with no oil and proceeded to try to break it up a little bit. Then I added a heaping teaspoon of garlic paste and a teaspoon of salt. From there I cook until all the meat is brown and all the pink is gone. Next I transfer the beef to a plate with a paper towel to absorb some of that grease. Next I put it in a bowl till I'm ready to use.
So now I've made my ground turkey sausage and I've made my ground hamburger. Now I'm going to move on to the sauce.
For the sauce I start out by chopping 1/2 of an onion. Once that's done, I'll transfer it to a bowl and move on to mushrooms. For this, I'm using 4 large mushrooms, and I'm not cutting them in any particular way. It's literally what they call a rough chop. Next, I'll add a couple tablespoons of olive oil to a pan, about a tablespoon of butter, and then I'll add my onions and add the mushrooms. Next, I added a tablespoon of garlic paste, a teaspoon of salt, and 1 teaspoon of truffle seasoning. From this point, I cooked it for about 10 to 15 minutes over medium-low heat. Just to get everything to caramelize. I know that's happening because the liquid in the pan will start to thicken up. So when that's done, I take it off the heat.
So now that I got my onions and mushrooms sauteed, I'm going to cut basil and parsley.
So there's really no right way to cut the basil for this. You just cut it whatever way you prefer. I prefer to roll up the leaves and cut these into small strips. As you can see, I just take my time doing it, but they look really cool at the end. Next, I chopped up the parsley into small pieces. There's really no right or wrong way, just so it blends smoothly.
Now, I feel it's important to say I do make a homemade sauce, but that takes 7 to 10 hours, and I don't have that kind of time. So I'm just using a jarred sauce to show you guys what I do to spruce mine up.
So here I added a regular-sized jar of store-brand sauce. I think it was garlic and herb. And then I added about 3 to 4 ounces of tomato paste. Then I added about 20 ounces of crushed tomatoes. And then I added my sauté of mushrooms and onions. Then I added 2 heaping tablespoons of the cut parsley and 2 heaping tablespoons of the fresh cut basil. And then I mixed it very, very well. You want those flavors to meld. Now at this point I tasted the sauce and it was a little more savory than I'd like. So I added 2 tablespoons of sugar and mixed that in. I almost forgot to add a teaspoon of salt, so I threw that in there, and now I have this sauce tasting just the way I want.
And that's it. The sauce is just that easy. But don't forget, always taste it to make sure. Hey, do I need a little salt? Or is it too thick? Whatever. Just make sure you keep track. That's so good. Now I have this on medium heat. I'm going to let it start to bubble a little bit. Then I'll turn the heat down, and I'll let it sit for probably about an hour. Because everything's pretty much cooked. It just needs to be brought up to temperature. So we get the ground turkey sausage done, we got the ground beef done, and we got the sauce done, which is on the stove, and now we're going to do the ricotta mix.
So here I added about 16 ounces of ricotta cheese to a mixing bowl, a heaping tablespoon of chopped parsley, and then added 1 egg. And then I proceeded to mix this very, very well until the egg and the ricotta became a creamy mixture. It probably took me about 4 or 5 minutes.
Now I'm going to boil my noodles.
And the only thing I have to say about boiling noodles is I always add salt to my water. I've had some people tell me why I shouldn't salt my water, but when I don't, I find that the noodles come out sticky. When the noodles are done, I strain them and then I rinse them off with a healthy dose of cold water. And then I give them a good shake just to get rid of that excess water.
Okay, now that my noodles are done, I'm going to grab my meat and my ricotta out of the fridge. I'm going to bring my sauce over from the stove, and I'm going to preheat my oven to 350 degrees, and then I'm going to put the lasagna together.
So I start out by putting about a cup of sauce on the bottom of the pan. Then I take a spatula and just spread it around a little bit. Once the sauce is spread around the pan a little bit, I pick the pan up and do a quick shaking motion to spread it evenly. I have no idea what this technique is called or where I learned it, but it seems to work very well. Next, I'll add a layer of noodles, putting them right over the sauce. As I do this, I'm careful to make sure all the noodles overlap. Next, I take about half of the ricotta mixture that I made and put it on top of the noodles. Then, using my spatula, I spread the ricotta cheese as evenly as possible over the entire top of the noodles. Once the ricotta is spread, I'm going to take the ground turkey sausage that I made and spread about half of that over top. This doesn't have to be perfect, but I do try to spread it as evenly as possible. Next, I'll grab the ground hamburger and repeat the process the same as the turkey, using about half of the ground hamburger to spread over the top. Now comes my favorite part, the cheese. I always try to add an even layer, but the amount of cheese I used was probably about a cup and a half to 2 cups. And now for the last step of this layer, I added about 2 to 2.5 cups of sauce. If you notice how I'm pouring the sauce, I'm doing this in a way that will minimize how much I'll have to spread this sauce out because I don't want to disturb the cheese underneath. Next, I'll spread the sauce out as evenly as possible. I don't apply much pressure and I almost drag the spatula across the top. I should probably mention that this is a thicker sauce. If it were on the thinner side, I might need to use a different technique to spread it. But when I make my lasagna at home, I always use a thicker sauce because that's what I like. So now I'm taking just a little bit of sauce and covering the ends where the noodles are exposed. I want those noodles to be covered so that way they'll cook properly when it's in the oven. The next step, I just repeat the process. A layer of noodles, ricotta cheese, meat, mozzarella cheese, sauce, and another layer of noodles. So at this point, I have about a half a cup of sauce left. I take that sauce and I pour it directly over the top of the lasagna. I don't need very much at all, but I don't want to let any go to waste either. And here, I'm trying to spread the sauce out as evenly as I can. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's going to be covered with cheese, and that's okay. But the moisture from this sauce will keep these noodles from drying out during the cooking process. Next, I put a light layer of Parmesan cheese over the top. This would have been a lot easier with grated Parmesan, but all I had was shaved, so I'm taking it and trying to break it up as I'm putting it on the top. Either way, this is going to come out really, really good. And lastly, I add my final layer of mozzarella cheese. Now, most people know that mozzarella cheese is the traditional cheese that's used in lasagnas, but I have made this before with cheddar, and it was very, very good. So don't be afraid if you try this to use your favorite kind of cheese. Finally, I take a piece of foil and cover the baking pan, making sure that the foil is sealed. Which means that I'm making sure that the foil is securely against the edges of the baking pan. Next, I'll place this in the oven at 350 degrees for 25 minutes. Okay, 25 minutes is up. We're going to reach in, grab the foil off, and set it in for another 25 minutes. Now there we go. I'll just grab the end. Grab the foil off. I'll push that back in and set the timer for another 25. So there we go. The lasagna is done. And I forgot to tell you guys, you may want to stick a baking sheet underneath your pan in case any of the bubble over or from the juice. We had a couple drops in the oven, but not that big of a deal. So this way, if it happens to you guys, you'll have a tray to catch any juice or sauce that spills over.
It was so good.